just get, there it is. Very good. Deborah Hazelwood in the house. Okay, let's see who else is with us. And let me get the YouTube live stream in front of me. Very good. Okay. All right. Who else is in the house? Where are you tuning in from? Before we get started with our daf today, I want to show you something. Can you see it? This fell from a red-tailed hawk that I saw today in Griffith Park here in Los Angeles. It's a majestic bird. And I guess, for a bunch of weeks, the animals had the park to themselves. And, now there's been an easing of restrictions and people are in the park. But the animals were just behaving a little bit differently. You could just get closer to them. And I have never been so close to a red-tailed hawk in my life. It was on a branch just slightly over my head. And it's huge. It's a huge, beautiful bird. I mean, from perch to head, something like this. It's beautiful, beautiful bird. I was really moved, and just to be close to it. And then I happened to find this feather nearby, which was definitely from the red tail that I saw. I think it's a breast feather. You could see the pattern on its chest. I took a picture. Beautiful bird. This is apropos of nothing, just that I was moved to see this beautiful bird today. How are you? Sushil Mahali says, hi from India. Nice to see you on the live program. Welcome to the show, Sushil. It's fantastic to have you with us. I love that we're learning Torah together from Los Angeles to India. Also, Aloma Grain from Reed City in Michigan, Sharon in Lebanon, New Jersey, Paula in Chicago, Lee in LaGrange, Kentucky. Mary is in from Central New York. James from Indianapolis. Wonderful to see you. Mary says, one of my favorite raptors. Indeed. Okay, let us learn. We are holding on Daf 69, page 69 of Tractate Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 7 and studying the Gemaras, the commentary on the first Mishnah of chapter 7. And as we learned yesterday, this concerns a person who forgot that it's Shabbos, or one who never knew, as we discussed yesterday. And there are three cases. One who just forgot what Shabbos is or never learned what Shabbos is and that it applies to Jews. One who knew what Shabbos is but forgot the date, just didn't realize it was Shabbos, and so he performed forbidden labors. Or one who knew what Shabbos is generally and that it applies to Jews, knew what date Shabbat fell on, but forgot or didn't know that certain labors were prohibited. And so what would be the resulting liability to bring a sin offering? That's the Mishnah that we're studying, and we opened our discussion yesterday. We learned that for Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, who were dear, dear friends, but argued strongly, passionately with each other, in many ways fought like cats and dogs, and yet Reish Lakish unfortunately died first, and when Rabbi Yochanan lost Reish Lakish, he felt like he couldn't even learn Torah anymore because he didn't have that partner to argue with. My friends, that is the model that we need these days. Somebody with whom we disagree passionately, but we maintain our love and respect for that person. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish agreed with each other that one who forgot the Ikar of Shabbos, one who forgot what Shabbos is and that it applies to Jews, when he remembers, when he realizes what it is. So he brings one sin offering for all of the Shabbats that he violated and all of the prohibited labors that he performed during that whole period of unawareness, when he just didn't even know what Shabbos was. They disagree with Rav and Shmuel in that they distinguish between the one who knew what Shabbat was and forgot for some reason, they say is a different case than the one who never learned. For example, a Jewish child who was taken captive among non-Jews and grew up not practicing Judaism, just didn't know what it was. Or somebody who converted on their own. This is not really possible today, but back then, according to only one minority opinion, a person who just decided to become Jewish but didn't get a Jewish education or go through the Beis Din, the procedure for becoming a Jew, getting educated by a rabbi, etc. So this person became a Jew but never learned about Shabbat. So for Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, those people, the child captive or the self-convert, they would be exempt from bringing a sin offering even when they learn what Shabbos is, as opposed to the person who once knew what Shabbos was but then forgot. That person would have unwittingly violated Shabbos, and he would be liable to bring a sin offering for that whole period of non-awareness. However, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish disagree with each other about somebody who knows what Shabbos is and who knows what date Shabbos falls on, but is unaware or forgot about certain prohibitions, right? Like the person didn't know that you can't, or forgot that you can't carry an object from a private domain to a public domain, or he forgot that you can't kindle a fire, or he forgot that you can't cook on Shabbos, or he didn't learn those things. So here, they disagree with each other on the particulars of the unwitting sin with respect to the forbidden labors of Shabbos. Now, to understand what it is that they disagree about, we have to understand the general principle that sin offerings, a sin offering is called a chatas. It's a type of sacrifice that you would bring to the Holy Temple when it's standing in Jerusalem. We haven't had it since the year 70 of the Common Era, but prior to that, if a person violated certain transgressions unwittingly, so then he would become liable to bring a sin offering. Which violations, what kind of violations result in liability to bring a sin offering? The violations which, if a person did it intentionally, the punishment would be chatas. What is chatas? It's usually translated into English as excision. And what it basically means is that a person is cut off. Their life or their soul is cut off in some way. Now, different commentators disagree on what excision means or what chatas means. Hold on. So, for example, Rashi says, most agree that it means whatever number of years a soul has been allotted by God in this world, right? We don't know what the number is. Nobody knows what their number is. But God knows. So God has allotted to us a certain number of years to fulfill our mission in this world. Some people tragically get a short number of years. Some people, blessed fashion, get a very long life. But whatever that number is, if you intentionally sin, right? If you intentionally violate the Torah, then you can be punished with chatas. And generally it means that you're going to have a shorter life than you would have had. It's hard to tell because we know people live all kinds of different lifetimes. It's not like, well, everybody lives to, 120, and anybody who's less than that, we know that they were punished with chatas. We don't know. We don't know what the lifetimes are. But whatever our allotted number of years is, it becomes less if you are punished by charis. Unlike the punishment of an earthly court, in an earthly court, you can only be punished if, what are the punishments of the earthly court? This is a rabbinical court. They don't have that many different punishments. Prison was not one of them. So it's either lashes or death, pretty much. There's different kinds of deaths, but there's severe punishments, either lashes or death, sometimes excommunication, but not imprisonment. That was not one of the punishments that a rabbinic court could impose. More often they were money damages. There was certainly a lot of awarding money damages. But for a person to get lashes, or especially to get death, right, for a capital case, it almost never happened, because if you were going to get death, now it could happen in cases of murder, but in terms of sins against God, there are some where the punishment in the Torah says stoning or burning, or there's other ways that you can be executed. But that almost never happened, because in order to be found guilty and face that punishment, you would have to be warned that if you do this, you will be punished in this way. And that warning has to come like right before you did it, and then you did it anyway. Without that warning, a rabbinic court would not impose that kind of execution. And so it just almost never happened. It happened in the desert. The children of Israel happened once in the 40 years, and that's written about in the Torah. But in the following 1,200 years, almost never, right? Almost never. I can't think of a case where it did happen. I'm sure there were some, but it's like almost never, because the conditions are so difficult. You'd have to really go out of your way to insult God. Like there's a rabbi standing next to you and he says, if you do that, you're going to be punishable with death, and then you do it right at that moment. How often does that happen? At any rate, charis doesn't require that warning, right? So this is a death at the hands of the heavenly court. Generally, it means that your life would be shortened by some amount. It wouldn't be like death immediately. It would just happen at some point. And the commentators all disagree. Does it mean that, it would happen before your 60th birthday, or it would happen before your 50th birthday? Might it result, God forbid, in the death of one's children? Or it might mean that because their life is cut off early, that they didn't get the opportunity to have children or to have more children. They argue. Rashi said sometimes it means loss of children or loss of the opportunity to have progeny. Sometimes not. Ramban says, depending on the severity of the sin, that the intentional transgression results in charis. Sometimes it would mean that a person's life is cut short here. Sometimes it would mean that they live their full life, but then afterwards they're punished, meaning they go to Gehenna. And that's a kind of, they spend time in purgatory so that the soul can be refined. Or sometimes, if it's a really bad sin, like openly blaspheming God and saying you don't care, just really bad, like doing idolatry in front of the nation, things like that, then a person might be punished both in their lifetime by having their life shortened, and after their lifetime by having the soul punished in Gehenna, in the next world after we die, and in extreme cases with destruction of the soul. As you can imagine, that's really the ultimate, because if we are souls and we only are temporarily living human lifetimes, but then we return to the world of souls, okay, and then we might have a temporary punishment where the soul gets refined of the sinful residue that it acquires in a human lifetime, but then it returns to the heavenly court and the heavenly choir and that beautiful hereafter, and goes on with its eternal life. But if somebody does something so bad while they're here that the soul might receive destruction, right? Ending of an eternal life. That's really the ultimate punishment. But you have to be really evil to merit that. At any rate, for our discussion on this page, what we're really talking about is who is liable to bring a sin offering, one who committed a sin unwittingly, of the type of sin that if he did it intentionally would result in chatas. So now the question is, what does unwitting mean? What does unwitting mean? Yesterday, we distinguished between unwitting and circumstances beyond one's control. So unwitting means, I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know that it was illegal. Versus somebody put a gun to my head and made me do it. The latter is circumstances beyond one's control, and for that, you're exempt because you didn't do anything. It's like somebody grabbed your hands and made you do a thing. You're not, you had no you had no volition to commit that act. But one who didn't know it was illegal or forgot that it was illegal, okay, so he did the act on purpose, he just didn't know. That person is an unwitting sinner. That person brings a sin offering, and as we discussed yesterday, it sounds unfair, but it can actually be a beautiful opportunity to go through the process of bringing an offering, reviewing your deeds from the time when you were far from God, and it can actually bring you closer to your faith, to God, to your family, to your community. A lot of good can come out of bringing a sin offering. Today, we're going to make a distinction between Rabbi Yochanan's view and Reish Lakish's view of what unwitting itself means. Not as the distinction between that and circumstances beyond control, but in terms of not knowing it's illegal, they make a further distinction. And what do we mean by that? Rabbi Yochanan says, you have committed an unwitting sin even if you knew that it was illegal, but you didn't know that the punishment was chatas. Right? You knew it was prohibited, but you didn't know what the punishment was. You still qualify for the unwitting sin as opposed to the intentional sin. Reish Lakish was a little bit more hardcore. He said, no. In order for you to be an unwitting sinner, you had to be ignorant of both the fact that it was prohibited and that the result, that if you did it, the punishment would be chatas. Right? So if you knew that something is prohibited and you just didn't know what the punishment was, per Reish Lakish, you would have been an intentional sinner if you did it. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you knew it was prohibited, but you didn't know what the punishment was, and you did it, you're not an intentional sinner, you're an unwitting sinner. And the law, the halacha, follows Rabbi Yochanan. This is, a nice... This is a merciful interpretation. It's a good interpretation, right? And it's important because, if you think about people who, they generally know that these things shouldn't be done. There's many Jews who know that, I've heard that it's prohibited to drive on Shabbos, but it's not my thing. I don't really do it. So that's a person who hasn't studied, hasn't learned, hasn't risen to that level. Okay, so, he shouldn't be held accountable for an intentional sin. So a person who knew that something was prohibited, but didn't know that the punishment for it is chatas, he's an unwitting sinner. He's not going to be punished with chatas. He's going to be punished. He's going to be liable to bring the sin offering, a beautiful procedure that he can engage in and then cleanse his soul here in this world. He doesn't need to refine his soul with some kind of punishment in the world hereafter. That is the distinction between Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding the unwitting sinner. Because of this distinction, we learn that a person could technically, theoretically, be liable to bring 39 different sin offerings. Why? Because there are 30, with respect to Shabbos, because there are 39 prohibited categories of labor, right? Carrying is a category. You could carry many different things, but you would only be bringing one sin offering for all the things you carried because they were all part of the same category. Writing is a category, planting is a category, and so all the different times that you violated that category, you would only bring one sin offering for all the, per category. If you violate all those, once you realize that those labors are prohibited and that the punishment for doing them intentionally is chatas. That's the difference between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish on the unwitting sinner. Now we come to a very interesting case on the subject of forgetting Shabbos, on the subject of forgetting the date. Right? So we talked a little bit about somebody who forgets the ikar of Shabbos, the essence of Shabbos, and now we just talked about somebody who forgets that a particular labor is prohibited. What about the person who forgets the date? He knows what Shabbos is, he knows that Jews are obligated to cease all labor on Shabbos, and he knows, he even knows which labors are prohibited, and that the punishment is chatas if you do that intentionally. But what if he didn't know that the date was Shabbos? He just didn't know it was Shabbos. What happens to this person? We learned in the Mishnah that he would bring a sin offering for every Shabbos that he forgot, right? Every Shabbos that he didn't know it was Shabbos, he brings a sin offering for that date, for that particular Shabbos that he forgot, right? I want to just double check that, make sure I'm not teaching that wrong. Going back to the Mishnah. One who knows the essence of Shabbos but forgets which day is Shabbat, i.e. one who lost track of the days of the week and performs numerous prohibited labors on multiple Shabbats, is liable to bring a sin offering for each Shabbat when he becomes aware that he performed those actions on Shabbat. So he owes a sin offering for each Shabbat that he violated, no matter how many different prohibited labors he violated on those different Shabbats. So the question now is, well, what if it happens to you that you forgot? And you don't know when Shabbat is? That's the tough situation. What if you're walking in the desert and you're walking for a long time and there's no one with you and you don't know what day of the week it is? What should you do? This is the case that's put now. What should you do if you're alone and you have no way of knowing which day is Shabbat? So we have two opinions. Rav Huna says, when you realize that you don't know what day is Shabbat, you don't know what day of the week it is. You don't know if it's Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, so you don't know how many days till Shabbat. What do you do? Rav Huna says, count 6 days, and then it's Shabbat. Right? So whatever day you're on, when you realize that you don't know what day of the week it is, from that day you count 6 days, and then the 7th is Shabbos. Hiyya bar Rav says, on the day that you realize that you don't know when Shabbat is, that's Shabbat. That day is Shabbat for you. You observe it as Shabbat, and then you count 6 more days afterward until the next Shabbat. What is between them? What is the difference between them? Sort of like, what is the philosophical difference between them? Rav Huna says, when you realize you don't know what day of the week it is, start counting 6 days, and then the 7th is going to be Shabbat for you. This is like the creation of the world. God worked for 6 days, creating the entire universe, and then God rested. So that's why we have Shabbat. That's why we observe Shabbat, because we're emulating God. And just as God worked for 6 days and then rested, we're going to do the same thing. So the one walking in the desert, when he doesn't know what day it is, he starts counting 6 days, and then the 7th is Shabbat. So what is Hiyya bar Rav saying? His philosophical underpinning of why he says, on the day you realize you don't know what day of the week it is, that's Shabbat for you, and then you count 6 days afterward until the next Shabbat. He's saying we're going to emulate Adam, the first person, right? Because the first man and woman, so Adam and Eve, were created on the 6th day. They were created on Friday. In fact, Friday afternoon, right before Shabbos. So they came into the world. They were told, hey, you can do anything you want, but don't eat that. They ate the fruit, unfortunately, tragically. And then God said, you're going to be kicked out. That's it. You're out of the Garden of Eden. You're going to have to live by the sweat of your brow, etc. But God allowed them to spend Shabbos in the Garden of Eden, and then they went out after Shabbos, right? So if we're going to emulate Adam, so we make, the very next thing Shabbos, and then count 6 days after that. But the law is like Rav Huna. We emulate God, not man, not even Adam and Eve, but we emulate God. And when we don't know what day of the week it is, because we've been walking, trekking in the desert, we're lost in the desert, who knows how many days we've been out there, weren't keeping track, no cell phone coverage, just lost track, don't know what day. So we start counting on the day that we realize we don't know what day of the week it is, 6 days, and then the 7th will be Shabbos. Now, Rava adds to this that if you're in this situation, you don't know when Shabbos really is, you realize you don't know, and now you're going to count 6 days, and then the 7th will be Shabbos for you. So how do you conduct yourself? So you're walking in the desert in this situation. You're in danger. If you have enough food, please God, you're walking in the desert, but you have food. And let's say you even have the ability, maybe you can make a little campfire at night. Maybe you're in the wilderness, not like the sand dunes, but you're a survivalist and you can get by, and maybe you could even gather some wood and make a fire. And you need it, maybe because the food that you want to eat, you can't even eat it raw, you have to cook it. But this day might actually be Shabbos. You don't know what day Shabbos is. You're acting as if, we're going to be 6 days of work and then the 7th, but you're cognizant of the fact that the day could actually be Shabbos. So what do? You make just enough food to sustain yourself for that day, knowing that if it really is Shabbos, you're violating Shabbos. But why are you violating Shabbos? To survive, right? So pikuach nefesh, to save a life, we violate Shabbos. But we don't make food for today and for tomorrow, because that's actually 2 transgressions. It's a transgression to cook food on Shabbos, and it's a separate transgression to prepare food on Shabbos for a day after Shabbos. So at least we don't have to do that. We make food, we're going to make the minimum transgression of the possible Shabbos that we don't know that which day it really is. But, on the calendar that we've assumed here, walking in the desert, we want to violate Shabbos as little as possible. So we only make enough food for today. Okay. So if we're only making enough food for today, and we're going to do that every day, right? Like on the 6th day of our counting, let's say, for example, we didn't know what day of the week was, but in actuality, it was Tuesday. Okay, so now for the next 6 days, we're going to cook food for ourselves. It's going to happen on the actual Shabbos, which is our 5th day, or our 4th day, whatever it is. And then we get to our 7th day, right? But we couldn't make food. We couldn't make, on what we thought was our 6th day, we're not allowed to make food for both that day and the next day. So we're going to have to cook on Shabbos as well, because we can only cook for one day at a time. So if we're cooking enough food to eat for one day, that day that we're on, how is Shabbos going to be different than the other 6 days? That's the question. And the answer is, because it's going to be different in our minds. It's going to be different in the way we approach it. We're going to make kiddush after Shabbos comes in. It would be great if we have some wine with us. If not, we're going to make the kiddush over the bread. But we're going to sanctify the day by saying a blessing. And we're going to call it Shabbos and treat it like Shabbos, even though we may transgress it just to prepare some food during that day so we survive. But otherwise, we're going to treat it like Shabbos. We're going to sanctify the day by making kiddush. And when the day ends, we're going to say Havdalah, the separation blessing that we make between the holiness of Shabbat and the mundane days of the working week. And then the last thing is that Rava says, if you have partial knowledge of what day it is, so let's say that you don't know what day it is, but you know, and you don't know what day you left. Right? You can't remember what day of the week you left. You might have left on a Tuesday, you might have left on a Wednesday, you can't remember. But you do know that you've been on the road, for 10 days. So if you know that it's been 10 days, you also know that you didn't leave on Shabbos, because you wouldn't have left, you wouldn't have started a trip on Shabbos. You can't do that. So you know that the day you left was a weekday, right? So I don't know what day of the week it was, but I know it was a weekday. So now if I can figure out multiples of 7, right, full weeks from the day that I left, so at least one day of every 7 that I'm counting now, I know that it's a weekday. So on that weekday, I can do additional labor. I can cook extra food, labor that I wouldn't do on every other day, which might be Shabbos. At least I know that day is a day that I can labor on, and we take advantage of it. And that's what I've got for us today. Let me check the comments and questions. If you're joining us late, I did a little show and tell at the beginning. This beautiful feather that I found in Griffith Park today from a red-tailed hawk that I actually saw up close. I've never been so close to a red-tailed hawk. So I say to you all, we've been locked in our homes for so long. If in your city it is now permitted to go take a walk in a park, go, because it's like the parks have changed a little bit. There were no people in them for so long. The animals are almost like a little bit friendlier, a little bit, it's like, I don't know, it's like they're happy to see us. And so it's so nice to get so close to that red-tailed hawk. And then I found this feather right nearby. And what a magnificent bird, and what a beautiful memory of that bird to bring home this feather. And I just wanted to share it with you. Okay. What else have people been saying? Let me see. Lynn Job says, if one is disallowed to bring a sin offering, what is the next step so that this willful sin category can be rectified? The gates of repentance are always open. No, absolutely. Absolutely we can make teshuvah. These days we can't bring sin offerings, and what is the replacement? Prayer. So prayer is open. The gates of tears are always open. The gate of repentance is always open. And so if we realize that, I used to be very, and as an example, a person might say, oh man, I used to be so callous, so cavalier, I just didn't care about the laws. Either I'm a Jew and I just didn't care about Jewish practice, or I'm a non-Jew and I didn't care about the Noahide commandments. Now I do care, and I look back on the way that I lived. I want to make an atonement, and I, first of all, I feel it. I feel all those times that I could have educated myself. I could have learned the right way to behave. I could have done better. If you have a sincere regret about that, you don't want to live in the past. Judaism is very much not about living in the past. So what's a sincere atonement? That you resolve to do better, that you organize yourself so you won't make that mistake again. Ultimately, you come to that situation in your life again where you sinned previously and now you're different and you don't commit that sin. If you hurt other people, you have to make amends to them, that's for sure. And then you're a new person, and then you stand in a new place. And it's a beautiful process that you can engage in. Okay, and Robin says shalom from Ohio, and Carolyn Dobson Chavez says wow, and Mary Garro says, do you still do sin offerings in these times? No, we don't. We don't have the opportunity to bring a sin offering. Instead now, all of the offerings, right? Sin offerings were just one kind of offering. There were also peace offerings and elevation offerings. We can't bring any of the offerings because the temple doesn't stand now. The replacement for the offering and festival offerings, the replacement for all of them, prayer, teshuvah, right, atonement, and tzedakah, charity. That's one of the most important things that you can do, right? Examine your own deeds, repent, atone, commit to do better, pray for help in doing that, pray for other people. Yesterday or a couple days ago, I said to you, that treatment of the tree where a tree was dropping its fruit early, and the way to address that was to hang stones on it, which was a physical treatment for the tree, and to paint it red, which was a symbolic treatment. And we discussed that. Why does the farmer paint the tree red? So that people, when they walk by, will pray for mercy for the tree. And if people should, it's assumed that people will pray for mercy for a tree that is sick, how much more should we pray for people when we see that it's an unfortunate situation? And I thought of that today when I was driving home from the park, because I was at an intersection. I saw, somebody crossing the street who looked like they were in really dire, unfortunate circumstances. And I remembered the lesson. I say, okay, God, please help this man. He really needs help in this world. I wasn't even in a situation where I could, cross 5 lanes of traffic and, help him and interact with him. I don't know if he was homeless. He wasn't begging for money, but it was just clear that that was a person who needed help in his life. And I prayed for him. It took me 15 seconds to say a prayer for him. But who knows? Maybe that prayer will help him. It certainly won't hurt him. That's something that is available to us anytime. To pray for others, it's very righteous. It's a very good thing to do. We've had that opportunity millions of times in our lives and we didn't seize it. So let's seize it now whenever we can. Whenever we remember, let's do that. Let's commit to do that. It's a good thing. I'm just going to mention one last thing. I received an email just before I went live with you. It was about a woman that I went to college with. I didn't know her. I'm certainly not going to share her name now. But I got the news that this woman who went to, really wonderful university, got an MBA from another wonderful university, worked, had a career, amazing field, did very well, married very well, had 5 kids, and a few days ago killed herself. 5, I think I don't know what the range of the kids' ages are, but just from photos that I saw and, and Facebook, it seemed like the kids maybe, ages like 10 to 15, that range. And, all I could say is that poor woman, she must have been suffering from mental illness. She must have really been suffering for a long time. It must have been terrible, where she thought her best option was to kill herself. Maybe she was unmedicated. I don't know anything about her. I didn't know her. But will you please join me in praying for those children whose mom took her own life? Please, God, comfort and strengthen those kids. Let them not, be so traumatized by this devastation that they end up harming themselves in any way. They're innocent. To have a mom take their life, it's just unthinkable. So please, God, comfort and strengthen those children and the husband, the widower, who lost his wife. I can't imagine this. I'm just hurting listening about it. But please, God, strengthen that family and give them the comfort that they need so they can somehow find a way forward. And let's say amen. I'm sorry to bring up such a sad story, but it was just on my mind before I came live with you. All right, my friends, I love you all. May we only hear